I mean, yeah, to me, it's like this is all pointing to something strange. I don't know exactly what, I don't know why, but it just doesn't seem like a bunch of guys standing around with, sticks. Like maybe some artisan that's been doing this since he was 7 years old and he just, chips away at vases all day and that's all he does. And then he dies and then he teaches his kids how to do it. Like, I'm like, maybe they could do it at scale and they could pump them out like one a week or something like that. And then you have like a bunch of them that are doing it seems unlikely to me. So I guess, I'm trying to understand what are some potential stories of how these actually came to be. Not necessarily what your own personal beliefs are, what you think happened, because again, you're not a stonemason, you're not necessarily an Egyptologist,
No.
but I guess what are some of the theories out there that exist as to how these came to be? You have this lathe idea where you have something that's holding this and spinning, and then someone either manually, handling a blade or some type of edge that's able to then carve these. Is that likely? But again, even that goes against what this story is about this time in history, that they didn't have lathes until much later.
Yeah, so the team, VR team who is investigating these, it's called the Artifact Foundation, and we have a precision manufacturing expert in the team called Chris King. He has a well-known brand in the States, actually, Chris King Precision Components. He's making hubsets and headsets for high-end bikes. So he's in the precision manufacturing world for like 50 years. He knows this inside and out. And he has an idea that you can make this with wooden lathes. So basically you can, if you have the right African black hardwood, and it's called journal bearing, where you have a shaft in housing with some lubricant, you can make something like this in hundreds, 100 micron or something. It's achievable according to him, but not with the mainstream explanation. You have to have a very rigid and stable mechanism to, as I said, to hold onto these and to make it. So basically the bearing has to have the same, at least the same, or even more higher tolerances than the end product.
Oh, interesting. Because even to make a lathe that spins,
yeah,
any imperfections to the spinning apparatus will then transfer to the piece itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's interesting. So if you have a perfect piece of pottery, hypothetically, you have a perfect lathe or a perfect pottery wheel. You can't have the perfect piece of pottery without the perfect wheel.
You cannot do a precise object with a shitty lathe. Yeah.
That's interesting. So that just brings in all, so many more questions that, this was obviously made with a lathe, but how the hell do they make a lathe that was so perfect?
You can make very flat surfaces by lapping techniques or with lapping techniques. You can lap 2 pieces of flat stones, and if you do it for enough time, it will be flat, very flat. It's a well-known technique. It's used even modern times, I think. You can also make rounded objects with different techniques. So making it, obviously not easy, but not impossible. The question is why these people did it. And the later Egyptians, those vases, those alabaster vases they made, why they are not even close to these tolerances. That's a softer stone, easier to work with, but still they are not resembling the same technology like the older ones. And you can see it in Egypt. The older stuff is always a little bit better than the new stuff. It's made out of granite. It requires insane amount of work, insane amount of manpower and tools. And the new stuff is a little bit less complicated, let's say.
And now, what is the mainstream explanation for why that is? What is the generally accepted consensus for why things seem to technologically devolve a little bit over time? Is there one?
I'm not sure exactly, but I think the basic explanation is that, kingdoms and countries were collapsing, and then they forget some kind of tech, and then they reinvented it. I had a nice conversation on my show with Luke Caverns, and
Luke is great.
And he just told me that in the Roman period of, so the later dynasties in Egypt were Greeks, sorry, not Romans, Greeks, and they figured out how to build monumental stuff out of granite again. So they built the watchtower in Alexandria, and it was made out of granite. So they sometimes figured out how to do it again, but you don't see it to that same extent, to the same extent you saw it in the Old Kingdom or the pre-dynastic Egypt.
I mean, that seems like a reasonable explanation. You know, it seems reasonable to me that you would have a culture that has access to technology, and that for whatever reason, that access to that technology gets interrupted, whether it's like through famine, warfare, you know, plague. One person has the information, or maybe a collection of 5 people, and then they all die under unfortunate circumstances. You know, they don't have great record keeping in order to like actually transfer this information back in that time. And so it's possible that things just go away.
You need 2 generations to forget something.
Right. Like I was thinking about it this way, like I don't know my great-grandfather's name, you know?
Yeah.
Like this is the guy like that, like the reason I'm here, really. I know up to my grandfather, and then that's it. Like, do you know your great-grandfather's name? Like how far back can you go? Great-great-grandfather?
Something like that. I started this family tree a few years ago. I think 5, 6 generations.
Okay. So you go probably to like the maybe 1800s, 1700s?
Yeah, something like that. But I don't know by heart, actually, but I have it on paper.
So it's one of those things where it's like even something that's personal in our everyday lives just is gone, you know? And like, sure, you could maybe find it, but in that time, without extensive record keeping, the idea that the information gets lost seems pretty plausible. But the functionality and the utility of like hard stone, you know, vases would seem to present itself regularly. And so people would find new ways or different ways to basically get the same result, but they won't be the exact same as they originally were.
Yes.
So to me, that is very interesting. And again, kind of goes, I guess, against the mainstream narrative of what these people were and what they did. And I think there's sometimes a neat understanding of history that things slowly get more and more advanced and that everything is continuing to go up. Whereas the reality is this might not be the case. Specifically in ancient Egypt, it seems like there is a de-evolution, and that there is technology that is lost in some capacity.
The dynastic Egyptians were great. They were probably the best of their time. The astronomy, the mathematics, all these. So they built amazing stuff. But you can see that those objects like these or the very big granite statues, the multi-100-ton granite statues, maybe they were not important that much anymore, or they started to evolve technologically on a different path and this was not important anymore, or they inherited a lot of this stuff from the previous culture. That's also an option. We don't know how old are these exactly. I was in the Grand Egyptian Museum a few months ago in Cairo, and there I've seen a ball like this with 3 different serial numbers on it. One from the current museum collection or archive, one from the previous, one from the before that. And sometimes they are dating these objects by the inscriptions on them, because some of these has a very, very primitive inscriptions like the pharaoh's name or something. I started to wonder, what if they did exactly the same we do now? They found those, they wanted to claim as theirs, they put it on display, they put it in their graves, but they were not the original manufacturers of these objects.
I mean, again, that seems plausible to me. I mean, that's the case throughout all of ancient Egypt, right? Like there will be a new pharaoh that perhaps discovers or claims an existing monument, and then we'll just put his name directly over the first name that was there.
Yeah, that's common. Ramses II, Ramses the Great, was well known by this. So his father was Seti the First, and he inscribed over his father's inscriptions.
Right. So this is common.
Yeah, that's why you can see those helicopter and spaceship glyphs in Seti's temple, because Ramses came and he overwritten some new stuff on his father's inscriptions, and it's flaked off in a way that it's now resembling this UFO stuff.
It looks like something strange.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting. If anyone hasn't seen it, I mean, you should look it up. We can probably drop it on the screen here while people are watching. But it's basically these old hieroglyphic inscriptions that look like helicopters or UFOs or planes, and they look strange. But the theory that you're explaining is that because of this overlay that would happen, where people basically put their names on top of existing names or on top of existing glyphs, they basically just change the shape of them completely. You could imagine if you wrote, like your name and then someone wrote their name on top of your name, it would create a weird looking thing in the dead space, And so basically trying to do like a tattoo cover up, there's going to be some elements that are a little bit weird if you're not, completely erasing everything. That makes a lot of sense. So to me, I'm like, it would make complete sense that they would happen with, these vases. If you see a name on it, it's like, well, it's not necessarily that guy's, because throughout history, people have been known to kind of take credit for things that they didn't necessarily create.
Exactly.
So that would make it difficult with the dating, But it's at least as old as that, likely older.
Yes.
Whatever the name is, it would be at least that old.
At least that old, yeah.
That's fascinating. So what is the mainstream pushback to this idea of having some type of, lathe, like a hand-cranked lathe to actually create these for the people in that time?
The lathe were attributed to those people thousands of years after these were first found,
so it's like Middle Kingdom, the idea of like a lathe?
I think so. I'm not sure, but I know that these were coming from the ages or the period before the official lathe begins or starts to be appearing. And I think a lot of weird controversial videos went viral, like they were made by UFOs or very, I don't know, 5-axis CNC machines, and the pushback started there, in my opinion.
The people were too grandiose in their claims.
Yes, exactly. And I think the easiest explanation is that either we didn't find those tools yet, or they were inherited from a different culture, but we don't know the connection yet. So probably it's a big missing link in history, in our understanding of those ancient people.
And there's also, I think, a fundamental mismatch that happens with scientific standards of evidence and what the American public will accept as likely or probable. So it seems like within the scientific standard, it's like we're not going to accept any type of theory without substantial evidence. Without some type of smoking gun that we are able to discover, we're not going to really change what is the overall story or what is the overall explanation. And so for us and for the audience listening, they're looking at these vases, they're made of super, super strong stone. They're so almost perfectly circular. Their tolerances are just so phenomenal. And they're built before the lathe. And there's an obvious mismatch here. And so for the general public, I think they can look at this and be like, well, yeah, this was obviously made with some type of primitive machine or some type of, hand cranked lathe with some type of 2-axis situation where, this is fixed here and then there's some type of fixed point above it and it's able to bore it out and they're able to angle it to then make it, somehow perfectly circular. But without ever discovering those machines, the people that were using them, some type of inscription about how they did it, it's difficult for mainstream archaeology to actually get on board. And so as a result, now we have this mismatch between sort of the institutional sort of scientific sort of scrutinizing side that needs this almost impossible standard of evidence, and then people like you that are doing independent research saying hey, this is obviously not made by hand. And there's a fundamental disagreement that occurs between both parties.
Yeah, and
that's how it seems to me.
And Egyptologists and archaeologists didn't look at these things like we do now. So no one analyzed these before us this way.